Welcome back to Serious Talk, Agentic AI. I am Greg Banks, your host. Thanks for coming along today. If you have ever felt like your company has 6 competing AI strategies and everyone is 90% sure that theirs is the right one, this is the episode for you. Tim Harding and Gavin Franklin from Serious Solutions join me to synthesize what they have learned across real agent rollouts, the work that has to happen before anyone writes a single line of code. We get practical about 3 things: the 3 planning phases that separate the rollouts that work from the ones that stall, the 7 deliverables you need locked in before execution, and why moving a little slower up front is how you actually move faster later. Let's get right into this one. All right, welcome to Serious Talk, Agentic AI. Tim and Gavin in the studio once again today. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for having us back.
Keep trusting you for now, right? Trust but verify. Guys, I don't know, in the audience world of consuming all these things, like if you're on podcast land, the amount of information AI world is just absolutely insane. I was reflecting on our own journey, kind of going back to the first AI episode we did, episode 6, and going through some of the topics we covered. And kind of wanted to go into today by saying why we're doing the episode we're doing today, kind of what's the purpose of it. But the build up to that, going back to episode 17, we talked about MCPs and skills. We went into buy versus build. We've talked about context, MCP servers, custom agent frameworks, building a custom agent end to end, AI security, multi-tenant, local versus cloud. Then we drilled in on local agents. We talked about token stewardship. That's a pain point everybody's probably facing very hard right now. If you go the cloud hosted route, where to host your agent. And then we went into a POC first model for development. And then last week, we kind of got into securing AI dev tool adoption. Can I trust these tools to become part of my stack? So if you think about getting into building an agent, one or a host of agents, there's a lot of things to consider. We haven't hit every topic, but we've hit the ones like based on what we're dealing with, what our clients are dealing with, and when there's pertinent changes going on in the culture. But Tim, set up today's episode. Talk about kind of what we're going to do with it today and kind of why that topic now.
Yeah, I think, again, we've talked about a lot of the different pieces that you have to do to kind of do AI implementation and specifically AI agents right and well. But I think now we're looking back and synthesize, okay, in order to do all those things well that we've talked about, what are some of the key things, kind of key conclusions and key deliverables that you have to have ready before you even get started with the implementation, right? There's some key foundational pieces that you need to have right for what you're trying to accomplish with AI agents and how you're sequencing and going about and spreading AI usage and agentic usage across your company. And so I think over time, now that we're able to look back and see across, several various rollouts, implementations, projects completed, et cetera, we're really kind of seeing a few things coalesce around core pieces that the companies that do it right get answered before they even jump into the implementation. And so that's kind of what we're going to walk through today. And kind of 3 micro phases, let's call it. All of this is kind of in the pre-execution phase. But, within this pre-execution phase of implementation planning, kind of 3 micro phases of assessing what needs to be built, initial architecture, and then putting the foundations in place to be ready to execute. So we'll kind of walk through each of those 3 phases here today and looking forward to sharing kind of what we found and what we've coalesced into kind of the key things that need to be done to get started to run a successful agent engagement. But yeah, Gavin, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? If you're listening and you're in the IT space or you're in part of a company leadership team, I would be willing to bet that when it comes to AI strategy, you're thinking, I have a 90% plan on how I want this to be executed, but 6 other people in the company have a completely different plan that they feel 90% confident in, right? So what we see more times than not nowadays when it comes to consulting for AI implementations is analysis paralysis. We've got all kinds of different initiatives occurring all over companies, and they really struggle to put it together. It's happening all across the industry because AI is new and it's rapid. So this is really, how do you synthesize all of these ideas into a forward-thinking plan, protect yourself from some of the things we even talked about last week? If you deal with security, you deal with token usage. If you don't have a plan day one before you start your implementation strategy, you're always going to be catching up to those 2 concepts. You're always going to be behind the ball. So it's really important for AI that you treat it like any other technical implementation. You wouldn't go and implement a CRM by saying, well, let's look at 5 CRMs and have 5 different CRM projects within our company. You'd want to have an overall goal where you want your company to be from a CRM space over the course of the next few years. So that's really what this is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of across each of these 3 micro phases, within each one, there's 1 to 3 deliverables that really businesses need to build, whether this is working with a third-party consulting partner, kind of like what we do with our customers, or whether this is just what you're doing internally with your own business and your internal team as well. I think these 7 deliverables that we've settled on are the foundational pieces that you have to have right to kind of get in and jump in first. And so we'll start kind of at the very beginning, phase 1 and assess. And in the very first deliverable and decisions that need to be made from the business side is a use case value model, right? Anything that we're doing in the technical space is ultimately to solve some type of business issue or problem and needs to deliver on some type of business value, whatever the business decides that value is. Value doesn't always have to be monetary value. Could be other things like customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, etc. But what needs to be agreed upon is what is the business value that the business is looking to capture by implementing AI or AI agents. And if this isn't clear, you could invest a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. You're going to get that at the end of this. And if there's not agreement between the technical team building the solution in the business of what value is supposed to be captured and is anticipated to be captured, and you go and implement a really hard implementation or project, and then you come back at the end of it, and the business has either changed their objectives or they weren't clear to begin with, or there's no value delivered, then that engagement is going to end and die on the vine very, very quickly. Businesses will continue to put effort into and continue to invest where they're seeing growing value. And that is the entire purpose. Like, if you're not implementing something to drive business value, why are you even implementing it? It is the foundational number 1 piece. And if you skip over that, it's going to raise its head later, right? The business is going to ask later, well, what value are we going to get from this? And you'd rather understand and know that at the very beginning before you even go and design the solution rather than find it at the middle or the end, because that will always cause significant churn in your AI rollout if you're figuring out in the middle or towards the end. I can guarantee that. So you need to look at the value model. And with that, what do we mean by value model? What we mean by saying is taking a larger objective and putting some type of objective, measurable, quantifiable goals or KPIs towards that objective. There's multiple different models and ways to go about doing that. But quantifying, we think that this is a legitimate, objective, quantifiable metric or set of metrics that the business wants to capture from this initiative to then say this engagement, this project, this AI rollout was successful or not successful. And you got to have that mapped out. But yeah, Gavin, you had some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is with AI in general, it just pushes more on the envelope that you need to understand your process, not just in implementation, but in planning. And the reason for that in the planning phase is because understanding what parts of your process are more manual allows you to develop those KPIs that can be targeted by AI agents, right? So a broad KPI in a situation where there's not a lot of manual process to replace, that's going to be difficult for an agent to deliver on that KPI. So, if you're somebody going through a sales cycle or a delivery cycle, and let's say you're writing code as a company, you're only spending 20% of your time reviewing code, right? Compared to writing the code. Well, a code review agent is going to have less of an impact on your delivery pipeline than a code writing agent. And that can be, all across the board when it comes to sales, when it comes to field service delivery. You need to be able to identify where your funnels are in your process and what parts are manual.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the most common misstep we see with having a value model isn't not doing it. I'd say almost every business says and kind of checks the box with doing it, but are you actually doing it well? And by doing it well, here, I think the broad KPI versus specific quantifiable and accurate KPI is the key piece here. Like one really common one is we'll see all the time is like, well, we want AI to increase our closing rate on our sales team by, X percentage. It's like, okay, great. How can AI actually increase your closing rate? There's several sales processes where that might not be achievable. And so you really have to go to the next layer deeper. So you could say, okay, well, actually, we found that there's a lot of potential leads, marketing qualified leads before they become sales qualified that we're not able to reach out to right now because our BDRs don't have enough time. And the step after we reach out to these potential leads is trying to book meetings. So if we have an AI agent that's able to do sales outreach to low quality leads that we're not having people reach out to today, and we're able to capture X number of booked meetings, we know that from a booked meeting, we have X percentage of deals close, and then you can extrapolate this has the potential to increase our win percentage, X percentage. That's the level of detail you need to have. There's a larger strategic objective, but then you looked at it operationally, and then you came up with a tactical objective that AI can actually move the needle on, and then you put a target there. And then you went back and looked, okay, because AI can apply to this use case, does it actually move the needle enough to hit the strategic objective, or do we need to keep looking for additional use cases to include in this engagement or not? And that's the level of detail that really needs to be answered before you go to any of the next pieces. Like you need to make sure you're actually building something that can actually move the needle on what the business told you to move the needle on. It sounds pretty basic, but it's a lot harder to do in reality, right? And it takes, going a little bit slower to eventually move faster later on down the road. So that's step number one. Step number two, Gavin, what do we got kind of once we settle on a use case value? Where does a business need to go next?
Yeah, the next step is the platform fit assessment. So this is a really critical point in any AI implementation strategy because in today's AI economy, every single platform out there is developing AI agentic capabilities, cloud-based platforms. And you also have a lot of smaller companies, startups, just a ton of AI companies that exist to, push some envelope or some purpose, some very specific driven agent purpose, right? So what you really want to be doing with a platform fit assessment is taking those KPIs and you want to be asking yourself a handful of questions. You want to be asking first, what platform does that bottleneck take place on? If we want to move the needle on that KPI, what platform needs to be targeted? And then it would be good to ask, does that platform have agentic capabilities to tackle the use case we're trying to solve for? And if not, that's when you start to say, okay, are there external tools that we can utilize? Should this be an externally hosted agent or should we build MCP services to support the agentic platform? Because then if this platform does have agentic capabilities, what you have to ask yourself is, does it have the data? Does it have the knowledge it needs to push that piece forward? And if it doesn't, that's where you start to think, maybe we need to look at MCP services. Maybe we need to look at external agent builds. So really it's taking those KPIs, finding where the issue lies on your platform and your architecture and saying, what's the best agentic pattern to apply there? Is it the platform? Is it external to the platform? Is it additional services?
Yep, absolutely. And you kind of have to decide this before you move forward as well, because as you move forward to target state architecture, and getting to the next level of detail, like there's some major swings that happen in terms of available capabilities and features depending on what platform you end up on, right? And so it is key. Some people might say, oh, well, this is too early. How do we know if we don't have the architecture? Well, you know the value that you need to capture, and you can do a pretty basic platform fit assessment, even just knowing that piece, plus with your current tech stack, your current procurement processes, your current security requirements, things like that. You're going to be able to narrow down, okay, do we need to go Anthropic? Do we need to go OpenAI? Do we need to go Salesforce Agentforce? Do we go ServiceNow as the base platform? Is it a collection of a couple platforms, right? Maybe it's more than one, but you really want to settle on the big pieces, because until you settle on the big pieces, it's really going to get hard to get down to the level of detail you need for a target state architecture later, unless you know what platform you're actually on, because it really affects so many different things there.
Yep. And this has a big impact too on cost and scalability. I think that's really the important thing to call out here. Because if you're a company that goes and starts utilizing agentic features of 6 different platforms, and then 2 months later you find out, well, this particular piece could actually be more useful on this platform, all of a sudden the scalability starts to be limited because you don't have an overall plan. And then you're starting to pay agents in various different places. So it's way more difficult to get a wrangle on cost if you start moving into platforms that you may not necessarily need to. I would start small and expand, and your entire agent plan can have multiple platforms. I mean, as much as it takes to move those KPIs, but each individual KPI should have a series of platforms as minimal as possible to achieve that KPI.
Yeah, absolutely. And so once you're done with this step, then you're kind of done with phase 1 of assessing kind of big picture. What is the value you need to capture? What are the big blocks, platforms that you have to work with? So then next you got to move over to phase 2, which is kind of initial architecture, right? And this isn't getting to, let's say, development ready architecture, but this is getting to a detailed enough architecture that you're able to move forward with actually understanding what your roadmap eventually needs to look like in the next phase in your charters. And then this is something that's going to continue to evolve over time as you continue to execute. But yeah, Gavin, why don't you dive into the third deliverable and step that businesses need to take? And this would be the start of phase 2, initial architecture.
Yeah, I would say that this architecture is slightly different than what you would see system architecture be designed as. This would be closer to integration architecture, but AI architecture is going to be different because really the most important thing is understanding data and capabilities. So you need to understand where each of your agentic processes are living and what platform. And then you need to understand what data does that agentic process need in order to push that KPI forward, what you're trying to solve for. And in doing so, you might realize, okay, well, we need to build an MCP service for this platform in order to pull more data in. Maybe MCP services already exist, but this architecture is more about, do we have the data available? Where does the output to the user go? Where does the output to the records go? Right. So in this use case, I would say it looks a lot more like integration architecture with a heavy lean on data, a heavy lean on availability to each of the individual agents or agent pipelines that you're building.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll correct myself a little bit. I said our initial architecture, but I think the key term here is target state architecture. So what is it you're shooting towards, right? So this is, hey, we know the value, we know the platforms we're working with. So generally, this is what we're shooting towards. This would be like the perfect picture of where we'd want to end up. And then you're going to go ahead and execute. You're going to have to make real-time decisions as you move, as you execute. And your actual architecture is going to end up a little bit different than target state architecture for multiple reasons. But because you're pushing towards that known point, you're going to be able to execute a lot faster and more effectively as you go forward. And so then that goes into the fourth step that really needs to be discussed and determined at a very high level before you jump into execution 2, and that's your agent evaluation framework. And so this is kind of tying steps 1 through 4 together and making sure that you're actually going to be able to observe and evaluate what you're building against steps 1 through 4 as you move forward with execution. And so with an agent evaluation framework, it's defining how success is actually going to be measured for the agents that you're building. And ultimately, it's going to be the actual mechanisms that you're using to measure towards those use case value KPIs we talked about in step 1. And it's going to have to factor in, though, what platforms you're actually using and what your target state architecture is. So you know what you actually have at your disposal, at your fingertips to build the actual reporting mechanisms. And having the design or framework in place for that before you get started as well. So you're able to go into execution knowing, okay, hey, I know I'm actually going to be able to measure whether we're succeeding or whether we're failing or whether we're just barely meeting our goals, so we can adjust as we go. You can make faster adjustments if you're actively measuring what's being done and use that to influence effective decision making down the road. So really key step, kind of which wraps up phase 2, is your agent evaluation framework. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is critical. It seems like pretty simplistic from, we have our KPIs, let's now evaluate against those KPIs, which is definitely an aspect of it. But remember, you have to be careful with your KPIs and what they're measuring. We kind of fell into this trap early on where it was, well, how do we measure AI success? Well, it's efficiency. And then the question became, well, how do we measure efficiency? Really difficult question to answer. So in order to do that, we had to establish an entire matrix of what efficiency looks like across each of our teams, right? So that's where you start to develop that agent evaluation framework. Maybe it's in the form of surveys to determine if it really is hitting the KPIs you're seeing. Maybe it's in the form of metrics. But I think that the agent evaluation framework goes beyond even just the KPI alignment. You're wanting to be evaluating the actual output of the agent, right? So it may be moving the needle and hitting your KPIs, but if you don't actually think that the output of the agent is what you're looking for, if it's a customer outreach agent, it might be saying some things that don't really align with our policies or don't really align with the way that we want to do sales. That's not hitting the success check mark on the evaluation framework. It's also an evaluation of token usage. Yeah, we're hitting the target, but it's costing us way more money than we thought. How can we scale down some of the context windows of the agent pipelines that we have in order to meet our metrics for the KPIs, but do it in a way that's responsible for cost? And then security as well. Evaluating the agent for its secure practices. Yeah, we're hitting our KPIs, but all of a sudden we have some exposed API keys. Let's make sure that that's evaluated in the framework as well.
Yep, absolutely. And so after phase 1 and 2, phase 1 being assess, phase 2, initial architecture, phase 3, we go into, initializing execution. And so here, I think the next step is, all right, now that we know the value we need to capture, the platforms, the target state architecture, the evaluation framework we're actually going to use to measure. Now you actually need to charter your initial pilots. This could be one or multiple pilots based on what value you're trying to capture. And it's really critical with these charters to document and capture from a business perspective, what are the scopes of those initial charters? So what's going to be in, what's going to be out in terms of what's actually going to be built. You want to name the pilot so it gets name recognition across the business, and you're able to use that as you're sponsoring and spreading that and getting knowledge spread about it across the business. You need to have an executive sponsor for that, somebody that has the right level of authority and scope and decision-making authority across the business to actually help move the needle with this and make sure that the right resources, the right timelines, and the right leadership support is being provided to ensure those pilots are successful. You need to give it a budget, whether it's an internal resources or whether you're going external. You need to set aside here's the amount of resources we're willing to give to this. Again, by aligning on that early on, you're going to be able to shift from a known point later. Better information for decision making later as well if you set that and lock that in. And then again, tying around from steps 1, the value model, and step 4, the agent evaluation framework. What is the success criteria for this specific pilot charter? And what are the objective criterias where we're going to say, hey, this was a success, this was not a success, or this is a go for full rollout, or this is a no-go. So what's your go, no-go gate as well? So critical things that you have to align in one or multiple charters, depending on the size and breadth of the initiative that you're running. And again, not all of these take a lot of time to lock in, but going through the motions and actually doing it well will ensure that you move faster in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, this is very similar to any sort of technical project, any implementation that you do within a company at this point in the gate. However, I will say one thing I'll caution against is the idea of, hey, we have 6 different platforms and 6 different platform teams. We can do all 6 pilot charters at the same time. You might be able to pull that off, but historically, especially for historical implementations, you could. Today, when we implement CRMs, we always say it's a little dangerous implementing your ERP at the exact same time, but people do it. We do it all the time. It's a very common practice, actually, we've seen. But for AI, what's the real stick in the mud is the fact that, yes, you can do that, but your ERP isn't going to change as rapidly as an AI platform is today. So I would approach this from, let's look at 1, 2 platforms, build out the pilot charters of the things we're seeing there. And once you get done with that delivery, it might be time to reevaluate some of those earlier steps based off of new technology that's been released. You're not going to get away from that necessarily. And it's changing so rapidly that you don't want to have your plans cemented as in, let's do big bang AI implementation for a full enterprise-wide AI engagement strategy.
Yeah, 100%. Things are moving so fast in the AI space that to wait, you're going to start falling behind. So you got to start doing something now. The ROI is absolutely there for many, many use cases. But to jump in and execute every one of these steps that we're talking about, they need to be living documents. And then you need to have and determine who has the authority to approve changes to those. Because you don't want anybody to be able to go and obviously change the use case value model or the platform fit assessment. So you want to have some type of process in there to govern changes to those decisions, but you also don't want to be so rigid that you're not able to adapt the earlier decisions you made in earlier steps with changing technology later. Because guaranteed, technology is going to continue to change, and you're going to have to go back to steps 1, 2, 3, or 4, et cetera, and make some minor adjustments. Likely, it's not going to be a complete overhaul, but if you're tweaking and kind of pulling the little levers that you have, you're going to see, again, faster velocity of getting results if you take that approach and you stay in alignment with the changing technology rather than kind of locking everything in, putting your head down and just barreling through it and then walking away with, and there's been this documented with several businesses. They go through 1 year plus big change AI initiatives, and then they come out on the back end and they realize, oh, the solution that we actually delivered is already kind of moot and out of date. All right, we got to go back to the drawing board and redo it. So that's not what you want to do here. So definitely keep that in mind as you move forward. And so that goes into step 6, which is an executive proposal. And I would always say, from the amount of businesses we work with, I would just say, do this whether executives are asking for it or not. And don't see this just as an executive proposal. We actually, one of the other terms we use for this is like an executive roadshow, but you want some type of proposal or deliver or leadership summary. And again, this could just be for the business, not just for leadership, but you want to have synthesized a 5-minute summary of your findings, what the outcomes the business is looking to get, what resources the business is looking to put in to accomplish those outcomes, what the risk posture is. And you want to have this ready to go around and show, because this is what's going to get your whole business behind. Like, this is a significant change exercise. And so if you don't go and communicate what it is that you're trying to do, then other people are going to start working on their own. Everybody's being told, go build AI. There's going to be other departments that will go start their own AI initiatives. They might be working in parallel, or there might be people looking to do similar things and they have no idea that this initiative is even going. So go around and share across the business, even if people are indirectly affected, and say, hey, this is what we're working on. You'll get some good feedback from those as well, but you're also just going to get more support across the board as you move further forward. Gavin, any thoughts on that one as well?
I think you're spot on. I mean, realistically, AI is the hot topic right now. So executives are getting tons of pitches all the time. They're listening to podcasts just like this one. So this is how you make this stand out and make it stick as a project.
Yeah, and I see so often people wait to put something like this together until they're asked. And then at that point, you're kind of behind the ball on the communication and messaging side of things from a change management perspective. So you got to do this up front. You got to continually update this, and you got to be going and championing it. One of my mentors from my past, he always said, if you haven't said something 8 times through multiple mediums, and assume your organization hasn't heard it or doesn't understand it. And I think that's very true of this too. So if you're responsible of helping running, or you're a part of an AI agent project, if you're not going around championing this and you don't have people within the project all on the same page of what's being pitched to the business and have the business understand and hearing it through multiple ways, well, then you're going to have a lot more friction later on, almost guaranteed. And so then this leads to the 7 engagement roadmap. So you don't want to just map out the pilot charters. Remember, all the way back to step 3, you have a target architecture. We also want to have a high level engagement roadmap, which is all the different big picture steps or phases that you think needs to happen to capture the business use value from step 1 that you're trying to accomplish, laid out against time, right? And showing your initial charters, and then at least phase blocks for other big phases you need to have. Again, a lot of people hesitate to try to have any type of roadmap longer term past what you're working on now, because they're afraid to make decisions on things that might change in the future. But you just have to accept the fact that things are going to change, but it's better to have something documented already so you know what you're changing and pivoting from, and you have something to communicate to people at the end of the day. Without it, you're going to be working across a much larger vacuum. So your engagement roadmap should map out not only the initial charters or pilots, but it should have the big piece blocks of everything that needs to happen in terms of large macro phases, all the way up to your value being captured that you set out to do in step one. And then typically, what does it look like after that too? What does a phase or phasing look like from a very high level after you've captured that value and you're continuing to assess, improve, or maybe identify what the next big initiative is that you need to go do. So an engagement roadmap is kind of the last piece here, the seventh deliverable that we think is really key to have before you actually go into just actual development, actual execution within the project. And again, having this soft set before you start is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of discussions, a lot of extra meetings down the road, because you're going to have a known point to shift from as you move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you can add things to that engagement roadmap to add more value, right? So things like your data migrations, if needed, to support your AI engagements. Your rollouts, not just in the actual agents, but rollouts to the company, right? So it's, yeah, we've rolled out this agent A to this portion of the company. Now we're targeting rollout agent A to the second portion of the company. And then additionally, any sort of external initiatives that are occurring. If you have a CRM implementation going on, you're going to have to take that into account when you're talking about an agentic roadmap.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, the engagement roadmap's a good place to kind of account for reality on the ground of other things going on with the business, compelling events, et cetera, with what needs to be done. And it kind of gives you a canvas to start working on that on. So there's a whole bunch that needs to happen after to actually implement any project, but specifically an AI agent project after these. But this kind of boils down and synthesizes 7 critical things. If you have a gap in any one of those 7 things, you can almost guarantee that that gap is going to cause friction later on down the road. If you have all of these 7 things, you're going to foundationally have a really strong initiative that you're going to be able to tweak, pivot, and execute on effectively towards success. And so you can really just focus in on execution rather than, some core foundational pieces that can cause a lot of churn down the road. So again, to kind of recap, we've got number 1, use case value model. Number 2, your platform fit assessment. 3, your target state architecture. 4, your agent evaluation framework. 5, your pilot charters. 6, your executive proposal. And 7, your engagement roadmap. These 7 things will set you up on a really strong foundation to execute effectively.
Yeah, gentlemen, there's so many aha moments in this that seem really, really obvious if somebody's just listening to this going down the road. Highlight a couple of things. One, everything we said here is before pen goes to paper or finger goes to keyboard, right? You might go do some Googling on the platform map to evaluate the tools and what their capabilities are, but all these happen at the beginning, and it really speaks to some of the core stuff we talking about in change management, Tim. If you don't define success at the beginning, what is it that I want? Then I can't measure if my requirements were defined to meet success. I can't define if my KPIs are ever going to be there. And I think in particular with AI, there's just a controversial element inside of businesses when AI shows up. So a lot of intentionality that you're speaking to around this, getting into comp plans and executive sponsorship, is telling people why this is coming, right? We all like shiny new things, but this is a shiny new thing that comes up that brings a shadow of fear to it. Because how many people have been fired because AI showed up and was successful? So people need to be really clear about their strategies when it comes to this. So again, all this goes into the plan. I think you guys break it down really, really well. Tim, we almost always end these episodes by saying, if you get to the end of this, you've still got questions, feel free to reach out to us. I want to give you a second to kind of speak to that in context of this, because you do this all day, every day, you and Gavin both. When somebody wants to engage us to get help with this, obviously not every engagement's the same. Not every AI strategy is going to be the same. So we have to tailor that for the client, their needs, their timeline, their budget, and so forth. Can you highlight a little bit about what reaching out to Sirius for help when it comes to this might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think kind of what we talked through today is a synthesis of what we're helping a lot of different businesses do right now to execute AI agents effectively. And in working with us on these 7 steps, we'll be able to help guide and help work through this process. These are key things that you have to think about. Again, AI is a big shiny thing, but you want to make sure that that big shiny thing that you're going to go implement actually can deliver and provide the business value that you set out to do it on. And so we're working with a lot of different businesses on this exact framework. This is kind of what we've settled on after iterating on it over several different engagements, seeing what worked, seeing what could be improved with different things, et cetera. And we're seeing, a lot of commonality of when these 7 things are in place, good things really happen. So if you're looking to capture business value from your AI initiatives, especially if it's around Anthropic, OpenAI, or Salesforce, we would love to have a conversation and say, how can we take this model and apply it to your business to go execute?
Excellent. All right. Well, as we always do with these episodes, we've got an artifact that'll go with this, kind of breaking down these 7 steps that Gavin and Tim have laid out. Hopefully you'll download that, go back, have a conversation with your team. And when you're ready, reach out. We would absolutely love to sit down and talk to you about this, help you be successful. Tim, Gavin, thank you as always, gentlemen, for helping break this down. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Craig.
Y'all have a great day. All right. Well, that wraps it for this episode of Serious Talk Agentic AI. Tim and Gavin, thank you both. You took something that feels chaotic, the scramble to go build AI, and you gave it a spine. Assessing the value, fitting the platform, architect the current state, define how you will evaluate, charter the pilots, pitch the executives, and lay out the roadmap. The line that struck me was simple. If you do not define success at the beginning, you can't measure whether you ever reached it. AI does not get a pass on that discipline. It needs it more because the technology underneath you is changing every month, so your plan has to be a living document, not a stone tablet. If you're leading or sitting inside an AI initiative right now, do one thing this week. Take the 7 deliverables from this episode back to your team and find the one that you skipped. That gap is almost certainly where you will find friction is hiding. If this helped, follow the show and leave us a review so that others can help find this resource. Full breakdown and the companion artifacts are in the show notes. A special thanks to Jason Fowler for allowing us to use his song, 𝗪𝘁𝗰 𝗵. As always, if you have questions or you want to get any help with your rollout, please reach out to us at serioustalk@serioussolutions.com. Until next time, plan with intention, build with discipline, and let the value lead you.